thank you, and I'm glad to be back, to be here. But I cannot help feel this is a trap. I have to talk about a policy report talking about a policy report in front of an industry audience is already difficult. But talking about a high-level policy report, such as the Draghi one, of 400 pages for 15 minutes before lunch, that is something else. So I will not bore you with the details about the inception of the report. What is important is that the Draghi Report is essentially a blueprint for the next 5 years of the European Commission, obviously under the guidance of the former European Central Bank president. It is not the only blueprint, and in fact, it's not even the only blueprint of a former Italian prime minister, given the Letta report on the single market, but clearly it's the most important and most commented one. So what is it exactly? Well, it is a significant effort to analyze the lack of competitiveness of the EU. And the report can be divided essentially into 3 questions. What are the problems that the EU is facing? What should be the strategy to tackle those problems? And what are the specific solutions? So I'll try to quickly cover those 3 elements. The problems which are in the slide you are seeing now are essentially problems that everyone is agreeing with. There is a lack of a single market, which is basically a problem of scale. We have, you as firms have difficulty in operating across Europe, and of course, kind of the Luxembourg situation helps, but there are problems kind of across the board in terms of scale. The second problem is a question of strategy. When you look at member states, they are still looking at problems from a national perspective, and if you want to compete with markets such as the US, even in the current situations, or China, that makes it difficult. But the third element that is probably the most relevant for this crowd is Europe is lacking investments. And this is basically where you are. Because the idea of the investment gap that is proposed in the Draghi Report is a private investment gap. And there is, if you can summarize the Draghi Report in 3 words, it's basically about leveraging private investments and private equity investments more specifically. That is an important change, because that means we are now at the center of the solution. And if you look 10 years back after the financial crisis, this was the opposite. We were part of the problem. So in itself, that is an important element of the report that needs to be kept in mind. Now, as investors in the real economy, you may wonder what industries and kind of what is the kind of the strategy from a sectorial perspective that the Draghi Report is looking at. And on this, we basically have, they are listed in the slides, priorities on energy. That is not coming as a surprise to anyone, given the questions of inflation of prices, etc., that happened after Ukraine. Tech and digital is a big deal of the Draghi Report. It's there is a huge focus on innovation. Clean growth as well. Again, in the context of the efforts on sustainability, this is something that a lot of focus is put on, even though the report is kind of moving from a let's do everything green approach to kind of clean industrial strategy, which is slightly different. And then obviously defense and also space are element for reasons that I think are not lost on anyone in this room. So what does that mean? Well, no surprises really. If you look into a bit more of the detail, and if you're investing into any of the sectors that are not there, that doesn't mean that it's not a focus, but very much it is identified, and one of the critics that have been made to the Draghi Report. It's a bit surfing with the last 6 months, like 2-year vibe, not taking a long-term approach to kind of the sector. So typically a lot of focus on AI. So that's the strategy of the report. Now, what are the solutions? This is a big slide with a lot of different elements, but there are many more solutions that are proposed in the 400 pages report. These are the ones that are more the focus of our industry. So, lack of private investments, questions around fundraising, how to allow more institutional investors, such as in particular pension funds and insurers, to invest into our asset class specifically. Questions around supervision that are quite relevant for this crowd as well, with the idea of creating a single securities market regulator, so essentially transforming ESMA into an EU SEC. Questions around distribution, with the idea of mobilizing retail investments. And again, there have been comments on the panel before that, retail, when we are talking about retail investments, we are sometimes talking about, sophisticated kind of wealth capital. Here, clearly, the focus is more on small markets, smaller players, but that's something we are discussing at Invest Europe with the Commission regularly. Taxation, again, not much surprise there. Questions around public contribution with the role of the EIF and the role of the EIB more broadly. Insolvency, which is a topic that has been coming back for 20 years at EU level. And then a lot of proposals that relate to sectorial matters. If you stop here, you kind of, which of those are actually going to be implemented? Some ideas are already subject to a strong backlash, and I just mentioned insolvency. That's a point that, harmonization of insolvency law from an investor's perspective, that's something that's been discussed for a while. And even though I've tried to just kind of say, well, going from unlikely to likely, it is unclear which ones are going to be parked, which ones are going to be pushed. And if you have a pure idea of what's in there, lend me your crystal ball, because even as a kind of a policy analyst at EU level, I couldn't tell you which ones are going to be picked up by the next Commission. What I can tell you, though, is that don't expect a bonfire of regulation. That's not going to happen. These are all proposals that will have to be implemented by the European Commission and by member states. We already know that a lot of people have kind of seen the Draghi report, knocked on the different Commission services doors, and just say, well, can this legislation go away? That's not how EU law works. Even though there may be some elements where kind of there will be less rules. It's been 2 Commission mandates that there is a 20% less law kind of restriction, and it never really implemented. Now, what's going to happen? And this is kind of the question. Everything I've talked about, every media vibe on the Draghi report, what of it? So you see, I kind of placed everything that has happened over the past few months. All of this will converge and is converging at this very moment, with a European Council discussing the Draghi report at this very moment. But also, most importantly, a new European Commission that will normally be in place in the 1st of December or potentially a bit later. That will ultimately, any of the proposals that have been made in the Draghi report will ultimately have to be proposed by the European Commission, approved by member states, approved by the European Parliament, and that is not obvious how this is going to be done. And so, importantly, the report is not bringing any specific law, so any Lux lawyer who's still in the room can be reassured that my comments on an EU SEC are probably among the kind of the unlikely pipe. Now, what it brings is momentum. It brings a cultural mindset. It's fitting into a cultural mindset, you know, a lot of kind of the positive pressure on more investments, but also a lot of focus on protectionism and some focus on financial stability. So it is part of a momentum, but it is also the momentum in itself. And from there, the strongest element here is that the industry, our industry, has been called to arms to save soldier Europe. And so you are now part of that story. That is what the report may be changing if indeed it continues to be picked up and it continues to be kind of the narrative for the next 5 years of the Commission mandate. So at the end of the day, and to end on a bit of a cheeky note, to quote a former US president, don't ask yourself what the report can do for you. Ask what you can do, not for the report, obviously, but for European competitiveness, because it is essentially the benchmark at which you're going to be judged when you're interacting with national competent authorities, with national regulators, with the European Commission, and with national government. This is what people are looking at. Obviously, there will be, you know, stronger elements, how Europe will react to a Trump victory, or how Europe will react to any of the side effects of a Trump victory, including with Ukraine. That's going to play a role as well. But the competitiveness debate is definitely one that we will see. So, to conclude, ultimately, this is what we will have to look at. The competitiveness angle is also something we are looking at from an investor perspective. So at the association representing kind of European interest in association with LPEA in Luxembourg. So very much happy to further discuss these things with you as going forward. We have a lot of priorities that we ourselves are putting forward. So this is only the beginning, and hopefully this will lead to positive changes, but this is very much in our hands. Thank you very much.